This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Luke, the 8th chapter, verses 40 through 56. Have you ever wondered who is worthy to receive the saving power of Jesus? You know, with all of the healings and the miracles and that sort of thing, who is it that measures up? According to the church, often in these days, it's the people who pass the right faith test, who say the right prayer, who give the right amount of money, who are devoted enough to support the pastor or the church or whatever it is. But when Luke tells the story of Jesus, we find something very different. Jesus brings the power of God into the lives of both the powerful and the powerless. This passage begins, now when Jesus returned, when he goes back to the other side of the lake and is in Jewish territory, the crowd welcomed him. They were happy to see him. The crowd on the other side, the Gentiles, had forced him out. They weren't ready to receive somebody who interfered with pork production. But now they welcome him back, for they were all waiting for him. They wanted to see more signs, more miracles, more magic tricks. He gets back here and he is encountered by a man named Jairus, who was a leader of the synagogue. Now, the structure of the story we're going to tell here is kind of a sandwich. It's called, technically, an intercalation, which means that we're going to start with one story, and then another story is going to slip in, and then the first story is going to complete itself. And the two stories work to interpret each other. So we start with Jairus. He's a leader of the synagogue. He's a powerful man. He's respected in the community. We even know his name. We often don't know the names of the people Jesus helps. He falls at Jesus' feet, a sign of worship, and he begins pleading with him to come to his house. Why? Because he had a daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. Why do we need to know 12 years old? Well, it kind of places her in the developmental thought of ancient people. 12 years old was the time when a girl became a woman. It was a time when her body began to change. It was a time that signified that she was ready for an adult life and that she was available for marriage. This is a young girl who's just barely entering what it means to be an adult woman in Jesus' time. So before her life can even get started, we're told that she's dying, and we're faced with the tragedy that so many of us in this world have seen, that children sometimes die before they even get a chance to live. So Jesus went with him, and the crowds pressed on him. They're kind of an obstruction. They're getting in the way of this story. Now, in the crowd, and here's story number 2, there was a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years. Whenever something like that parallel of 12 years happens, you want to stop for a minute and think about what they're saying. I mean, the first thing that we're saying is this woman has been suffering as long as the little girl has been alive. That's a long time. Secondly, while this particular little girl has maybe just started or is on the cusp of starting her monthly cycle, this woman has been bleeding steadily over 12 years. And she'd spent all that she had on physicians. No one could cure her. So she's now destitute, bleeding, which puts her in some kind of state of not feeling very good and being sick, but also being impure, unable to completely live the life that she's called to live. So Jairus is the powerful one, and now we meet one who is powerless. She's not even named. Lacking any power at all, She doesn't even feel like she can call out to Jesus. So she comes up behind him. She touches the fringe of his cloak. Hebrew men, and this is still true to this day for Orthodox Jews, they wear a cloak which has fringes on it, and that shows that they are accountable to the Torah. So Jesus would have these fringes that would be coming off his cloak, and she came out and she touched that fringe. And immediately the flow of blood stopped. She was healed completely. She was restored. She was set free. Jesus now asks, "Who touched me?" And Peter thinks he's nuts. There's a whole crowd pressing on him. I mean, who touched you? That's like asking, is there oxygen around here and which molecule went into my nose? There's no way to tell. I mean, who touched you? So Peter says, "Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you." But Jesus says, no. Someone touched me and I noticed that power had gone from me. Jesus has a power that is manifesting the very power of God, and he seems to know when that power leaves him. Jesus feels. He is human. He lives within human limits. There's limits of knowledge that are shown here. He doesn't know which person did it. He can't figure that out. He lives with the limits of time. The days still cycle by for Jesus. He's limited by space. He can't be in two places at one time. He's limited by the power of his body and by mortality, as we'll see in the cross. Jesus is us. And so he asks a question that we would ask: who touched me, when something affects him? When the woman realized that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, the same thing Jairus had done at the beginning of this. And she declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, how she had been immediately healed. Now, most people are probably thinking Jesus is going to be mad, but his response is, "Daughter," which is a declaration of a relationship with Jesus and a proclamation that this is a child of God. This is God's own son saying, "Daughter," on behalf of God. "Your faith has made you well. You trusted in me, and so your faith made you well. Go in peace." So he's on his way to see the little girl. He heals this woman and has a dialogue, and too much time has passed. While he was still speaking, someone came to the synagogue leader's house to say, "Your daughter's dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer." In other words, Jesus has limits, I'm sure, so if she's dead, she's dead. He says, "Do not be afraid, only believe, only trust, and she will be saved." And so he takes Peter, James, and John, and the child's father and mother up into the room. Everyone was weeping and grieving her, but he said, "Do not cry, for she's not dead, but sleeping." They all laugh at him. Kind of that uncomfortable laugh. "Oh, Jesus, really, I'm sorry." Then he takes her by the hand and he calls out, "Child, get up." And the spirit returned and she stood up at once. He directs them to give her something to eat, which is a proof that she's really alive. Dead people can't eat. Her parents were astounded, and he told them to tell no one. He doesn't want them telling anyone, because this is not how he wants to be revealed to the world. That will happen in the cross and the resurrection. Jesus demonstrates the power to heal and to set people free from not just the illness of 12 years, but from death itself. Jesus brings life in the kingdom of death. Jesus shows his power so that it heals. He shares it. He allows it to go out from him, and he offers to do the same for you. Jesus frees all of us from that which robs us of life. And that's what Luke wants you to know. Jesus has the power to give you life. He does so for two in this story. May he do so for you. Amen.